Okay, we're almost at the end, and now we're at chapter 12. Chapter 12, if you can believe it. So, chapter 12 is the World of Darkness chapter. And so this is a World of Darkness chapter through the lens of Wraith, what's important, or what should be important, what can be important, what you're most likely to interact with, what you're maybe least likely to have crossover problems with. You know, that's what this chapter is for. Let's talk about that for a second. Crossover problems. There are some games which don't pay much attention to the cosmology of the World of Darkness. It's pretty easy to fit Wraith into them. And there are other games in the World of Darkness which pay a lot of attention to the cosmology. And depending on how tightly you cling to that specific game's specific presentation of its specific spirit world material, will determine exactly how much trouble you have with it. So I've met lots of people who wrestled and wrestled and wrestled with this kind of stuff when playing Mage or when playing Werewolf, and others who, like me, found it very easy to incorporate and make a rich part of the experience. But all of those things are tied to personal experience, personal preference. These are things you have to deal with. You have to work with, embrace, accept, let go, cling to more tightly, etc. You know, that's all on you. There's nothing really that the book can do about that. So chapter 12, the World of Darkness, I gotta be honest, it doesn't open very well. Got a very weak opening, which is focusing on, you know, that there are humans in the World of Darkness, basically, and that is the first section. And it gets much better as soon as we turn the page. We have mediums, and ghost hunters, and amateurs, and secret orders. Some of these will be nice flashbacks to Wraith material from the past. We have the Sons of Tertullian, we have the AEG, we have the Virgilian Foundation for Thanatonic Research, and we have the Orphic Circle, right? That deals with the easy way to get the humans going. And there's a small sidebar on humans in the underworld, which the first sentence made me laugh in the good way, right? Humans crossing into the underworld stand out. So then we get into the awakened, you know, so vampires. It briefly talks about vampire power levels, and this is a part of World of Darkness games which sometimes gets misunderstood, I suppose, understandably, because this is presenting the vampires in Wraith mechanics terms, so that you don't need any of the other books. If you have the other books and you want to bring them in and you want to run them, you're going to have to do some thinking, right? When a Wraith power specifically targets another Wraith characteristic which isn't represented in one of the game lines, you have to think a little bit about how that's going to work. It's not a major challenge, but it is something that you have to consider and make known. So we have neonate vampires, we have elder vampires, and then we have a specific division for the Tremere and the Giovanni, and then ghouls. Then we're done with the vampires, and we go into the werewolves. And there's a really cool piece of art here, which is something that happened specifically in one of my chronicles, and it was like, whoa, no, it must be a pretty common situation, but it's a pretty cool piece. That's on page 411. So we get into the werewolves, again redefining them in terms of Wraith terms. Then this is actually shorter. We don't really get into the specifics of any of the werewolves, and then we go into the mages. We focus specifically on the Euthanatos and the Dream Speakers, the Void Engineers, and then others. And the others are things like the Marauders and the Defandi and stuff like that. Then, that's another short short section. We get into the changelings, and it brings out the Slua most notably, and however you want to pronounce that. And then there is becoming restless, right? So this is awakened beings becoming restless. We didn't have to do that for the humans per se, because that's what this entire book is about, right? So becoming restless for the awakened beings, how does that work? Then the Arcanoi and the awakened, specifically things like Argos embody fatalism, inhabit, keening, lifeweb, moliate, and outrage, pandemonium, phantasm, puppetry, and usury. So pretty much everything, right? But not the special stuff. Then we have dwellers in the storm. Okay. So this is getting us into all the nasty stuff that you can encounter in the Tempest. Then there's a really, really visceral looking piece of art on page 418, which I'll just let you imagine. And then there's a full page sidebar, full page, on the Barghest, which is cool and worthwhile. So we have the Tyndallhound, we have the Aileron, the Cerament, all things that we're familiar with, the Shroud Ripper, etc., etc., the Kraken, the Mourner. Then we get into Angels and Demonics, or Angelics and Demonics, sorry. And then that part is done, and we move into Relics and Artifacts. Right, there's all kinds of cool stuff in here. I'm not going to go through several page, and there's on page 430 it dips into Spectre artifacts, more good art. This chapter is rife with good art. One of the particular ones that stands out and really made me laugh, and it's the feature of 430's huge piece of art, is the Maggot revolver. So that's cool, and that's it. Right, so running to page 430 from 405, right? Doesn't seem like much. There's not much to talk about in terms of the game, right? But this is a pretty quick way to flesh out the world, to say, look, there's other stuff out there. There's other game lines out there. You don't need them. You can play them this way, and they will give the emphasis to the Wraith characters, and it's a Wraith Chronicle, so maybe that's what you want to do. And if you don't want to do that, if you want to have parity, if you want to have more equal footing between this type of chronicle and the types of chronicles that the other games produce, well, go ahead and mix them together. But remember the advice which was presented earlier, which is be careful. And having in my own past continually added each new game line as it came out, the feeling it can produce if you are not careful, right? If you don't consider, it can lead to a very, very crowded world, right? With an awful lot of competition and an awful lot of friction, which begins to strain credibility, right? So being very, very cautious, allowing all of these things to exist out there somewhere, but making all of them difficult to find is one way to approach it. Another way to approach it is to only present some, and maybe only sometimes or once or rarely, that kind of thing. These are all decisions that are in your hands. Those of us who've tried it have had great successes and ugly, messy failures, right? That's part of the fun of playing. You get to experience that for yourself. But, all right. So, like I said, short chapter. The next chapter, chapter 13, is a particularly juicy one, and one I'm looking forward to seeing how it has been updated or expanded or, unified. Exactly what treatment did it get beyond the kind of extant policy of rewriting softly what has existed before. So chapter 13 is The Other Dark Kingdoms, and that will be next.